Hi everyone, it's Sandra. So this is Eat My Shorts, and I've got 3 goals for today's check-in. This is the bin that last time, which was 23 days ago, I noticed there were a lot of flies buzzing around this bin. Then I went ahead and fed some really moldy, rancid food that had flies in it as well. So I want to check on the status of that. Look at these worms in the burlap. Worms love burlap, especially if it's moist. Have to be careful it doesn't dry out though. All right, the second thing I want to do is this is the bin that I went nuclear. I fed that really moldy food right on top of that little bin that contains the toenails and the fingernail clippings. Landa and I collected our toenails and fingernails for months, and then I added them to this bin 83 days ago. So it's almost been 3 months. I really want to see some action on those. And then my third goal that I mentioned last time is I was noticing that this material is starting to finish. So I want to set up a migration zone. And today I'm doing something novel. I'm actually going to create a worm bin inside the worm bin and see how that goes. So first, let's do a bin assessment. The first thing I noticed is I didn't see any flies fly out when I removed the bubble wrap or those brown grocery bags. So that's an encouraging development. This bin is outdoors and not sealed tightly, so I'm hoping flies that flew in can fly out, even if they have reproduced in here. The adults or the mature flies will eventually just take wing and go find somewhere else to live. For those of you looking for a fly solution, maybe time is what we need. Maybe the flies just need time to get on with it and fly away. As I said, it's been almost 4 weeks since I've been in this bin, so by leaving it undisturbed, maybe that solved my problem. I next want to check on bin moisture. It's not sticking to my hands too badly, nor is the material overly compressed at the bottom here. The lumps that I'm finding seem to be chunks of long-term food, perhaps those avocado pits that break off into polished halves that never seem to get eaten. Other than that, I don't really see any identifiable food in this part of the bin. It was the other end where I went nuclear though, so I got to make my way over there to see what the worms did with that moldy feeding on top of all the toenails and fingernails. This bin has been treated to some really microbially rich, mostly processed leaf mold and even some of our finished compost. You can see the rich blackness of the vermicompost. I think that really has helped speed the bin along and keep the worms happy, even though I've been leaving them probably longer than normal between feedings. They've still got lots of stuff to tuck into and seem quite happy here. So the next part of this bin check-in is to go into the area where I did that feeding of the moldy material right on top of that container full of toenails and fingernails, to see if I can finally see some action on those. I'm going to put down this brown paper grocery bag to keep the material separate. I love these brown grocery bags for this purpose. They also act as great moisture indicators. When they dry out, you know that you may have a moisture problem in your bin. So here's the container where I fed the mostly processed leaf mold and then all that moldy food in my go nuclear feeding, trying to get the worms to digest, or the microbes to digest, those toenails and the fingernails. Just stirring up the bottom here, you can see these are finished castings. A little bit of dry material and a little bit of food left by the looks of it. Unusual after 4 weeks that the worms would still be so intently working on something. Anyway, let me just move this material over and let's get into the bin where I gave that moldy and, dare I say, fly-infested food to see what's happened to the material, what's happened to those toenails and fingernails, and did my strategy work? I'll just peel off a little finished material there. I did not see any flies come out of this material at all, which further reinforces that time was the solution to get rid of this fly infestation. Bang this container out here. As castings get near completion, you can see they get a little bit muddy there, and I'm not going to get them out of this container just by tapping. With the blackness of this material, it's easy to see worms still in here, but those of you with sharp eyes will also see there's some fingernails and toenails clinging to the sides of this container. So let me just clean this out a little bit, and we'll check on the status of those nails and see whether after 83 days we're seeing any progress. At each check-in before this, whenever I've singled out one of the nails for assessment, they've been hard and still sharp, amazingly. I didn't see any increase in flexibility at all. So let's look at this one. Bend it. Oh, and look at that. It broke in two. So fingernails and toenails are comprised of a structural protein called keratin. It's not the worms eating them, it's the microbes. But ironically, you wouldn't classify this as a green in the conventional sense, but it is a source of nitrogen for the bin. Let's take a look at this one, see what happens. My fingers try to hold it steady here. And yep, that one broke in two as well. So those of you thinking that fingernails and toenails are a source of grit, no, they're not. They're in a very long way a source of nitrogen protein for the worms once the microbes have thoroughly broken them down. So I'm just pulling up this material where we added that moldy fly-infested feeding just to take a little closer look at it here. Obviously, still a lot of those nails are visible. I don't think any of them have dissolved. I think maybe with my agitation, I might break some of them into smaller pieces. The moisture would have really helped accelerate this. With some of these bigger nails, I don't know. This one still looks pretty intact. Yeah, it's not breaking in two. So it was thicker than the other two. So, you know, obviously not all the nails are going, but that's very reassuring. I think now that the dominoes have started to fall, the nails will disappear from here on in. So just checking for any remaining food scraps. That actually is a piece of wool, waste wool, that we use in our compost. So a long-term food, another nitrogen source, ironically. I'm not seeing any other concentrations of worms indicating there's still food in here. The needles are still hanging around, but like I noted last time, that mostly processed leaf mold is gone. You know, and now it's been almost 4 weeks, so I had no expectation that the leaves would still be visible. It's just the needles from our pine tree. Sorry, I bumped the camera there, so let's just check this one other nail, blaming Landon for all these large toenails. This one bends it. Nope, that is not going to break in two. But you know, I think I'm content to say that these nails are going to be gone in no time at all, or it's certainly no further concern for me. So at just under the 3-month juncture, I'm going to call an end to the toenail experiment and just work these nails right into the bin in general. So that's what you can expect. If you put fingernails or toenails in your bin, you might have to go nuclear and give them a really moist feeding. So now let me turn my attention to my third goal today, which was setting up a bin within a bin migration zone. Part of my objective with this is to see how many worms I've got in this bin, setting up a concentration of a migration zone, whether you use a bait cup or like I'm trying to do, create a bin within a bin. If you can attract the worms all to that location, boy, do you have a good idea of how many worms you have. Rick from Gardening with Barchuckin just did it by feeding his bin bokashi. I don't have anything nearly as yummy as that, but what I do have is this takeout container that I use to freeze some food scraps along with some pulverized egg grit on top of it. Now, of course, if I just left this in the bin, I might create some protein poisoning for my worms. So here I'm adding handfuls of that semi-processed leaf mold again to make sure that I'm creating my little mini bin within a bin to set up my migration zone. Now, normally if you were doing a bait cup or something, there would be holes all in the container, but that's not necessary. Worms have chemoreceptors. They know where the food is. And as long as you kind of give them a pathway into the material, my bet is that the worms are going to find a way into this bin within a bin and not be able to get out that easily, or not want to get out that easily, so that at my next check-in, I'll be able to empty this out onto one of those grocery bags and really get a sense of how many worms I've got in my bin, eat my shorts. I'd better not leave it 4 weeks though, or the worms are going to eat that takeout container. I'll just give them back their heavy brown paper grocery bags to be a nice lid over everything. And then they also, on top of that, they're going to get their comfy burlap blanket back again. I'm making a hodgepodge of putting all this stuff down, but having good airflow to this area is not a bad thing. That's a lot of food in that container. I don't want the gases to get trapped and cause problem to the worms. So having it kind of in a rough and tumble top to this is going to work in my favor, not to create problems down the road. All right, everyone, that's my check-in with Eat My Shorts and the fly problem and the Go Nuclear experiment and the toenails. Bye for now.